sermonette today, as we are approaching the days of unleavened bread, I thought I would speak about a topic that has changed a couple of times in the last 10, 15 years. I will say historically, in the understanding of the church, going back to 1968, maybe till the year 2000, in that range, we had always believed, the Bible was instructing us that we must, for 7 days, eat unleavened bread. And there should not be any day during the 7 in which we did not eat unleavened bread. But some maybe 15 years ago now, I don't have the dates exactly, the church came out with a revision to that understanding, and that is that we might have a day during the days of unleavened bread when we didn't feel that we wanted to eat unleavened bread. One of the reasons for that was the question that was posed: suppose you wanted to fast during the days of unleavened bread. And would it be okay then that you didn't eat any unleavened bread on the day that you were fasting? And you know, there were other various questions to be asked about eating unleavened bread. And it almost seemed to me it finally came down, suppose you don't like unleavened bread. Well, I don't think any of us are eating it because we liked it, but that was kind of the approach in that way. Here's the scripture that I chose, and we could have chosen from a few of them, to relate to you what the Bible has to say about eating unleavened bread, specifically for the time period of 7 days. Exodus chapter 12, verse 15. 7 days shall you eat unleavened bread. Even the first day you shall put away leaven out of your houses. Whosoever eats leaven from the first day until the 7th day, that soul shall be cut off from Israel. Semantic argument was raised in that regard. And that semantic argument made a comparison between the phrase that I just read to you, which says, 7 days shall you eat unleavened bread. And the comparison is found in Exodus chapter 35, verse 2. And there's another place where it's found as well. I think that I only located 2 places in the Bible that had this same exact language, at least part of it, there in the text. 6 days, Exodus 35 and verse 2, this is in keeping, this has to do with the commandment of keeping the Sabbath day holy. 6 days shall work be done. So you see the comparison there. 7 days you shall eat, 6 days shall work be done. Now, the argument then went on to say, we know that you don't have to work all 6 days during the week. And you may, for example, take a day's vacation. You may even take off a week from work, and you won't be in violation of the commandment just because it says 6 days shall work be done. So that was the comparison that was made between those 2 scriptures, and the conclusion drawn was, okay, you can skip unleavened bread for 1 day if you have a legitimate reason. And so that was the position of the church until maybe 2 or 3 years ago. We sort of repositioned ourselves in that regard, and now we're back, at least in United, to the point where we are teaching, although not as forcefully as we once taught it, that you should eat unleavened bread for 7 days, which is, in my opinion, the correct reasoning in relationship to this scripture. And I had 3 reasons why I feel that we should eat unleavened bread for all 7 days. First of all, I think the comparison between these 2 scriptures is not appropriate for the reason that we are not comparing 2 things which are similar at all. We're comparing the secular week. 6 days shall you work. We're comparing the secular week, those 6 days, to that which God says is holy. You see, the 7 days of unleavened bread are called God's holy days. You find them listed, all 7 of them, in Leviticus 23, where those occasions are called out. And so I think if you're going to compare that which God has made holy, sanctified, set apart, to that which is secular, something that just comes as it goes, then you're making an inappropriate comparison. That's my opinion. And I believe in that regard that the Hebrew language is loose enough to allow for not making the exact same conclusion from those words being used in the same place. So that's my first reason. We're comparing that which is holy to that which is secular. Second reason, Leviticus 23 calls all 7 days feast days. And in regard to the question, what if you would like to fast on one of the 7 days of unleavened bread? I think God has called them feast days, and it's not really appropriate for us to be fasting on that which God has called a feast day. So that would be my opinion about that. I'm not saying that everybody agrees with my opinions here. I'm giving you my opinions, and I feel that I feel pretty good about those opinions, good enough to stand here and speak to you about them, but everybody will not agree with me. So I would just say, where it calls it a feast day, and the language there is important, the original language as well, it's a celebratory time. It's not appropriate for us to fast on the days which God has called feast days. Third reason I have for you in that regard is symbolism. Unleavened bread symbolizes something we are to work at putting into our lives for 7 days. What is it that unleavened bread symbolizes? 1 Corinthians chapter 5 and verse 8, I don't have it in my notes, but you should all be familiar with that verse of Scripture. And Paul says there, let us keep the feast with the unleavened bread. And for these 7 days, and these 7 days only, unleavened bread pictures sincerity and truth. So if we avoid unleavened bread one day, or as some people might have taken it, they could avoid it all the time, because the argument also said it's just forbidden for us to eat leavened bread. It's not commanded that we must eat unleavened bread during this festival. And I'd say it is commanded that we eat unleavened bread during this festival, because unleavened bread symbolizes sincerity and truth. So as we eat the unleavened bread, we are putting into ourselves, and we mentally are also to be focused on putting into our lives the thing which it symbolizes, sincerity and truth. Is it appropriate during any of these 7 days for us not to be working on putting sincerity and truth into our lives? I would say there's not a time during the days of unleavened bread that we should not, not a day that we shouldn't be focused on putting sincerity and truth into our lives. So that's what the festival is about. And we call the festival the Days of Unleavened Bread. And so I think that also says something as well. So for those three reasons, I would say that we should be eating for all 7 days the unleavened bread of sincerity and truth. The latest church judgment, which is a couple of years old now, returned to that. The statement that we should be eating unleavened bread every day. Now, it wasn't made as forcefully as it had been made in the past, and it wasn't made as forcefully perhaps as I've made it to you here today, but I think it's important, and I hope as you approach the days of unleavened bread, you will think in terms of doing that on every day. For 7 days, we should eat unleavened bread.